meetings once in a while. And there's no good coming from this, as you probably recognize.
Yeah,
and and they have the updated paperwork. I think I sent you a link with the packet documents, the updated packet documents.
You did, yeah. I just went through. There's two phases to this thing, and as soon as we start recording, I'll kind of go into what I was reading here from the Farm Bureau. There's more to this than meets the eye. It's being touted as one thing, but it's couched as there's something else couched in with it, and that's what we need to look at.
Okay, well, I've got I'm currently recording, so we're good. I might have to edit it. I don't want to tell people about my secret meetings.
Probably not a good idea.
But anyway, so yeah, I didn't. So you can. What do you want from me, or do you want to tell me what you're thinking, or?
Well, yeah. So I just wanted to go through this a little bit. I'm hoping that people listen to this podcast because it's vitally important that we have this discussion, or at least that I get somebody that understands the legal ramifications of what the legislature is about to do, explains it in enough detail, whether citizens have an oh shit moment, which they need to have right now.
Yes, they do.
So the number one thing that my fellow citizens need to understand is that there are already laws and the structure in place to give both parties that have been injured relief under the law in suits and to give 11th Amendment immunity, sovereign immunity, to state officials who are discharging their responsibilities under the law, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All of that already exists. There is no need to draft legislation giving further immunities to state officials for activities done in an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
There is absolutely no reason for this legislation. Now, granted, it can be argued to some extent that what they're doing is that they're taking on the position that we're in a martial law declared situation when they haven't officially declared martial law. So in a martial law declared situation, it's like, okay, well, does the state have the ability to declare martial law? Like, well, you can argue, well, yeah, that provision in Idaho Code for the emergency powers, which I believe is Idaho Code Title 67, sort of gives them that leeway, right? Well, they're right away there's a conflict. Right away there's a conflict. Well, here's the conflict. In order for the states to be able to declare an emergency, it would have to be done in conjunction with and in coherence with the Department of Justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is an emergency that's affecting the entire United States citizenry. So, all right. So the Department of Justice has came out publicly, and they have stated numerous times. This is William Barr, and he's also put out a memorandum to all 50 states. And in the memorandum, he's detailed the Department of Justice's position on deprivations in this emergency situation. And their position is that the states cannot engage in deprivation. So what does that mean? Well, that means that the position of the Department of Justice is such that the states can't declare martial law softly. See?
Mm-hmm.
If you declare martial law softly, or in any other term, quote unquote, I'm using, quotation marks here, the declaration unspoken of martial law would carry with it automatic deprivation, suspension of private rights. The Department of Justice has said, no, you're not doing that. You're not doing it. The position of the state of Idaho says, okay, well, seeing as how we can't do that, we're going to pass legislation protecting ourselves from the deprivation that we've subjected to the citizens of the state of Idaho to in this quote unquote emergency. You see what's going on?
I think so, but explain it anyway.
All right. So
other people may end up listening to this.
So the law on martial law, the the reach of martial law and what happens during martial law is very, very clear, right? It's happened before, and it's very well understood that in a martial law situation, private rights are suspended. But it's also well understood in the case law that in order for martial law to be actually implemented, that means that the courts no longer are in operation. The United States courts,
Right.
state and federal. The courts no longer are operating. That means everything is handled by the United States military, right?
Yeah.
That's an actual martial law. So here's what we have. We have a situation where the state of Idaho, we're just going to talk about the state of Idaho, we'll let the other states kind of deal with themselves for the time being. The governor of the state of Idaho has assumed the powers of martial law without declaring the martial law. The courts are still operating. So we have a hybrid scenario in which he's suspended private rights. He's been notified by the Department of Justice that's not applicable and it won't be tolerated. And the Department of Justice has given remedy for that. And so now to protect themselves from what they've done, they're going to pass law to give themselves immunity.
But the crime's already been committed, arguably.
That's
so
right.
They'd still be liable, right?
That's right. So,
okay.
But that has to be solved in the courtroom. And that could take a very long time.
Meanwhile.
Right. So the citizens of the state of Idaho cannot let this law pass. Because what that does is it gives the governor and the administrative system in the state of Idaho that's really spearheading this effort. It's the constitutional offices and the administrative offices really are two different things, and people have to understand that. So the administrative offices are of the most concern to the governor because they hold the most liability here. So he's trying to protect them from torts and other civil liabilities, which is why the legislation is now being, and they wanted to try to keep it hush hush, and they don't want the people to know about it, which is like unconstitutional. It's like the legislature of the state of Idaho can't operate without the people knowing what they're doing. Period. Okay, so now let's get into the immunities that they already have. The legislature of the state of Idaho has the same 11th Amendment immunities as the other political subdivisions in the other states around the nation. And that goes under, you can look at this under Ex parte Young, in which it was decided in 1908 that a state official discharging their responsibilities under the law, if they inadvertently injure somebody, they have that immunity. Because it's inadvertent, they didn't do it.
Well, that makes perfect sense. It lacks mens rea, right? And the actus reus, which is the mind and the action to commit the crime, right? Or
exactly.
Right. Okay.
Exactly. So they have that immunity. Well, in this particular situation, it's different. If it goes to court, if this ever does go to court, and it's probably going to have to at some point, what the court's going to have to grapple with is that the Department of Justice already making it clear to the 50 states in the union that they don't have that as an option. They've already been notified that it's not an option, which means that their deprivation was willful.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God.
Yeah. This is a willful deprivation because they've already received notice from the Department of Justice that that committing this act in an emergency power situation was against the policy of the Department of Justice, because the Department of Justice was not going to side with them that their emergency powers extended to deprivations under a martial law scenario.
So when did Barr mention this?
Several times. It's all over. You can find it on YouTube. You know, William Barr. You can go to the Department of Justice website and read the documentation on deprivations. Okay. Right on the website. Okay. So this is well understood, and it's going to be, you know, if it goes to court, it'll be well understood that they had knowledge beforehand, before they started doing, you know, these measures, that the Department of Justice position was that no deprivations were going to be allowed. So we got a really interesting situation now where, to my mind, it looks like you have a group of people that are afraid of something. They're afraid of something. Otherwise, they wouldn't be going to this kind of an extreme. I mean, like, look, I'm a law guy. I study the law all the time. I work in the field of law all the time. You know, I'm paralegal. I do this work. It's like, I wouldn't, if I was in his position, I wouldn't do this. It would be setting myself up against the policy of the Department of Justice and putting myself in a position that is almost indefensible if I get drug into court to have to answer for the measures that I've taken, you see.
But if you've abused people for 10 years and remedy is a long way off, if it is at all, the abuses that have incurred against the people for what I would call, I guess, lack of remedy, which the one I claim that Governor Otter won't allow happen, or Little, we just continue to be abused for years until if we have the courts acting appropriately, that we may end up getting before or after we're dead. So what do the people do in the meantime?
Well, the power of the people right now is in the tort and civil liability process.
They're going to remove that.
They remove that. It's like there is no remedy anymore, Tom.
Well, what about the question of statutory supremacy? I mean, when they go through and they want to be able to create a statute, arguably, that suspends the unalienable rights of the people. I mean, that's essentially what they're doing.
Yes.
And so how can that even hold up in court, whether it passes or not?
Well, it won't hold up in court. Eventually it'll get shot down because let's look at it.
We just need somebody that's willing to put the money. So in other words,
Yeah.
if I don't have the money, I'm not entitled to equal justice under the law then.
Well, I will tell you this. Here's another way to look at this too. Under Ex parte Young, we can issue an injunctive relief. So we can injunction the governor against implementing the law by getting that injunction passed, right? So we wait, we see what they do. If they pass the law, we immediately move into court and do the injunction.
Okay.
Now under Ex parte Young, if I'm right and we're meeting all the elements of the law to be able to do this, and chances are in the 90 percentiles that the injunction goes through and is allowed.
Wow. So in layman's terms, if you had to explain this to somebody that knows less than I do, what would you be waving your red flags at and alerting people to do, or to what does this do to the people, first of all, in layman's terms, and then what actions should the people do right now to bring attention to this in a way that they can, in layman's terms, explain to other people?
Well, that's a good question. And let me tackle the first part of that, because that's probably the most nefarious part of this, is that, okay, well, it can be argued by some people, and it's probably going to be argued by some people unknowledgeable in the law, that, well, this only reaches to emergency powers. I'm like, okay, all right, I can sort of agree with that, but here's your problem. And I'm going to give an example of how this works. When the H1N1 virus was decimating the United States and 63 to 65 million people were infected, and the death rate was higher than the COVID-19 death rate, the mortality rate was, there was no global pandemic. And it was a devastating virus. More powerful than this one. Okay, well, so then we have the COVID-19. We have the numbers in a 0.2% mortality rate on average. And they call for a global pandemic. Well, here's the problem. If that is the case, then there is no established criteria to declare a national emergency. And a national emergency now can be declared on virtually anything. And if you don't think the radical left will seize this power again in the future, if they're losing to the right, you are sadly mistaken. So without some sort of criteria with which we can just judicially hold the radical left, accountable for being able to exercise emergency powers and seizing emergency powers in these situations and depriving citizens of remedies under the law for violations of due process and deprivation of rights and so forth. It's like you would have to have some sort of legal criteria that would have to be met to be met in order to initiate these sorts of emergency orders. There is none. It doesn't exist.
So let me bring things down a little more simply. And this is what I had noticed from the piece that I had read. Um, they basically threw that it gives relief and immunity to the government. Oh, but it also, includes the people. That was just a way for them to sell it.
Yep.
The other part that I was paying attention to was, God, I just had another senior moment because I was on to something. Actually, I can't even. I guess I'm just gonna have to. Oh, I know. So what I got from it was any term of or any use of the word COVID within any of the things that they write will automatically create immunity for the government. So they could.
Yeah.
So what they could do is, because we all know the forced vaccinations is coming next, right? So
Yeah.
if they say that this is because of COVID, or these mandatory medications that we're taking, or these ventilators and things like that, when that starts coming out, or the masks that have caused respiratory problems and all that, I mean, forced vaccinations could be included in this. Forced removal from your home could be included in this.
Yeah.
I mean, is there any reason why it couldn't?
No, that's just it. If you understand how the law works and you understand the reach of this legislation, because I think people sometimes can have a difficult time with, okay, well, I read that legislation and I can't fathom the reach of it, right? So if you do any sort of law for an extended period of time and you get into these sorts of things, you realize that there's a law of unintended consequences in the legal realm that is activated as soon as you pass legislation that affects classes of persons, or affects, in this case, an entire, the all of the businesses in the state, and included in that is the municipal corporations operating in the state, which are the state government, the state police, the judicial system, all that. They're all municipal corporations. Okay, that's well understood. I think everybody should understand that, and that's written into the state constitution, right? And they're municipal corporations because they can be sued, and they can be sued for deprivations, right? So the one aspect of this, when you're looking at the legislation, is, okay, I can understand trying to create some sort of buffer zone for corporations that are acting under authority from the state to operate in a COVID-19 situation. Let's say they tell people to wear masks, and somebody enters their store and they're not wearing a mask, and a lawsuit ensues, and people want to sue it's like, okay, well, the way our legal system is set up, it's set up for the courts to determine if there's an injured party.
Yes.
Right? That's what that's standing. That's called standing.
Right.
Right? Now, under the law of standing, the person suing the other person has to assert a real injury in fact. That's why you can't just sue anybody for anything and win, because if you can't assert a real injury in fact, the chances are really good it will be thrown out of court. Right? We already have that system in place. This legislation doesn't do anything other than protect those who may have a civil liability because they've exceeded their authority, right? That's all this legislation does.
Well, and I think the original piece that I saw said it was confidential, which means that they were going to be proposing this to the legislature without the people even knowing. And I would even question the legitimacy of that in itself. Here's the other thing I wanted to mention, and maybe this is just something to go down the rabbit hole with. Another reason why people can't understand the unintended consequences of things like this is because, number one, they don't know enough about the politics and the leadership that they're dealing with in their state, and they also don't understand the greater conspiratorial elements which are connected to the whole point of legislation that may be created. In this particular instance, I believe it is a conspiracy, because you have these unelected bureaucrats that have appealed to the governor somehow, because now they've realized that they've got their hands dirty, and they're not sure how to get out of that. That is, in essence, a conspiracy to be able to do harm, to be able to protect yourself against other people. and especially in secret. And then the other part of that is when the governor decides to be able to call a special session, because he wouldn't allow us to do it, to be able to rescind the national emergency or the state emergency. He decided that he wanted to be able to launch a special session because only he, I guess, according to the Constitution, state Constitution, has the ability to determine the scope and limitation of for which he's calling a special session.
Well, that is actually true. That's true. He can do this. Like it's not that this is illegal and unconstitutional for the governor to do what he's doing right now. But
right.
What is unconstitutional is that they can't hold a session and exclude the public.
That's right. That's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, no, and point well made and received, and that's exactly correct. It's like there's no version of this where the governor gets off legally with being able to hold a special session, especially for this type of legislation, do it secretly, pass it under the cover of darkness, and pull it over on the. Okay, so all right, why would you do that? Well, look, if you already pass it, then you at least cover your butt until the injunction hits, and maybe, just maybe, you're able to use this in very nefarious ways for those that are the most vocal political enemies that you may or may not have. Okay, so I think you're right. I think there is a conspiracy here. There's a conspiracy between him and his cohorts to protect themselves in this scenario, and it's quite obvious. You wouldn't draft legislation like that. Okay, so no governor in the states, in the 50 states, or any states of the union for that matter, that are constitutional understanding, constitutionally adhering governors with a very strong, and let's not say conservative bent, because that maybe calls into question some people that may not be conservatives but are strong constitutionalists. So let's not besmirch and exclude some of these people that may fit into that category. Let's just say those that believe in the Constitution and who believe in adhering to it. All right. So there's governors out there that are not strong right or conservative, but might be middle of the road, moderate Democrats. Okay. And there are some out there. So let's just speak to them for a moment. Those moderate Democrats and the rest of them, under no circumstance, under no version of this would allow this type of legislation to even be submitted for proposal to the legislature, knowing full well that what they're doing is that the damage this does to private rights for the citizens is far-reaching, brother, far-reaching, and it extends past just this moment.
Right. So here's another thought. Are you done?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. I just didn't want to have you have a senior moment like I did. So there's a question on what the legislature can do and whether they would actually do it. So, obviously I believe to be able to guarantee our pristine Republican form of government that we were so brilliantly guaranteed, it would allow the legislature, I think, to be able to maintain control of an out-of-reach governor, to be able to suppose that he gets to run rogue to the point of, boundless authority until January. It's just beyond all comprehension for me. But now, since we have the governor that constitutionally, state constitutionally, has the authority to be able to call a special session and determine the topic, what do you believe the legislature can do? And with what you know about Idaho politics, what do you see them doing?
Well, there's a good group of legislators in the state of Idaho that are very strong conservatives that have enough power to maybe create a bit of a filibuster in this scenario. We would hope that would be the case. I'm going to speak with some of them and find out what sort of strategies can be looked at here. I think the best thing that we could do, and this ties in with what the second part of the question that you asked me earlier that I have yet to answer, I'm going to answer now. And that would be that everyone listening to this podcast, if you understand what I'm talking about and you realize the issue that we're about to be under, you call your legislators, you call your representatives, and you tell them, do not pass this legislation. Blow their phones up.
Okay. All right. So I want to drive this home one more time. As simply as possible, why should they take this particular action? I mean, they're so busy, Ron. I mean, they're just so busy. They've got a lot going on. They've got families. You know, if I'm going to really fight for my freedom, I want to know exactly what I'm supposed to say and why I'm supposed to say it. Can you re-articulate that one more time for them?
Yeah. All right, so let's go to the why first, and then let's talk about the why. The why is the most important aspect of all this. Is like, okay, you know, I people don't want to waste their time because you're right, they are busy. They're fighting for their lives right now during this pandemic and trying to scrape by and make a living and raise their kids and go to work and try to hold a job and all this stuff. It's a lot. I know, I'm just like the rest of them, right? I'm trying to hold a business together and do all this stuff, and in the middle of a situation where it's very difficult for me to get what I need to do my job because vast portions of industry are shut down and no longer available to me. So I get it. I get it. All right, the why. The reason why this is vitally important is because this gives the radical members of the Idaho legislature, and I guess maybe if somebody's hearing this for the first time, they say, well, radical members of the Idaho legislature. I don't know of any radical members of the Idaho legislature. And I will just tell you that there has been a group of conservatives that are being besmirched and derided by people across the state because they've been standing up, digging their heels and standing up to these people. Right. And so they've been called all sorts of things, and right wingers and far left right wingers. And, you know, articles have been written about them. And this has been a full-blown political attack against these people. Well, these people are my friends. We all have the same political ideology, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term. We believe in the same things, and most of it, you know, I know that 90% of what we all believe, I really firmly believe, is based on the intended role of government, the intended role of, you know, the legislature, what they're supposed to do, the powers that they do and do not have, the limited role of government, so on and so forth. These are conservative ideals, right? Limited government, rights to the people to be upheld at all times, etc. So, like, who can disagree with these philosophies? It's like when you look around the world right now, what you're seeing Black Lives Matter, Antifa, right, people's rights, the rights of people, you know, Ammon Bundy's group, all these groups are coming out, and the message that they are trying to give everybody around them is that the people's rights you're being deprived. There's a deprivation. And because there's a deprivation, the people need to band together to face and overcome that deprivation. Now, the thing that I think people don't understand quite well is, like, where are the deprivations occurring? Well, this is one of them. What the legislature, what Butch, I almost called him Butch Otter. Well, because, you know, little Otter. What Brad Little and his cohorts are proposing right here is a private rights grab of epic proportions, in that they don't have to declare martial law to have sweeping deprivations of your rights in the state of Idaho. They don't have to declare it. If this passes, that's what this legislation does. And it's very well understood. I said it previously about a half hour ago, or however long that was ago, that it's well understood in the American system. If you were going to create a nationwide systemic deprivation, it would have to be under martial law. It cannot be had in any other way. This legislation gives them that ability without declaring martial law.
Wow.
That's the why.
Wow. I'm just making notes.
Okay. And if that's not a powerful enough why, I can go on for a little bit longer. You know what I mean? I mean,
it's powerful enough to me, but I just like to make sure that if I do have any circle of influence, that people are clearly understanding and taking the time to listen, that they have the firm grasp on what this actually means. So I tried to have that come in a bunch of different other angles. So if there's any other way that you need to do that. So are there any, so the video portion of this, when I'm done, will be probably uploaded to YouTube before it's sent to audio to my podcast, because I still don't have many listeners on that. I just started it. Is there anything that I need to be able to pop up on a share screen to be able to go through any of the chapters and verses for anybody to understand what we're talking about? Or do you think?
Yeah, I would make all the documentation available to people that we've talked about, like ex parte Young.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a chat in Zoom? Because I can send you these.
Yes.
Or maybe I can even post it. Let me
Yeah,
see.
there is.
Chat. Okay, got it. So I'm gonna post this to chat,
Okay.
and you can go look at these documents. All right, that's justia.com. That is ex parte Young.
Okay.
You're going to need Barron versus Mayor of Baltimore. It won't become clear to you if you don't have any legal acumen, but that might be fodder for another podcast. So let's just get it out there.
You're the first person that told me about that. You've never stopped telling me about it, and and I talk about it actually all the time. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, well, it's critical because that's 1833, and that court case single-handedly altered the way that private rights were going to be dealt with in the United States. And if you don't understand that case, you can't understand how the private rights system works in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Which of the two parties, and when I say parties, I mean federal powers. We have a dual federal power system. Mm-hmm. State government, federal government, right? So either the federal government has a liability in the deprivation issue, or the state government has a liability in the deprivation issue. And depending on which one has a liability, also depends on which of the other ones may or may not enjoin or be a part of it, or use their police powers, et cetera, et cetera. It's like this. What this comes down to, what Barron versus Mayor of Baltimore comes down to, is it comes down to enforcement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Enforcement. Who gets to enforce the citizens' rights?
Well, wasn't that the case that you were telling me about that? And I know we're probably going off the tangent on here, but that was the one that actually where the state actually appealed to the federal government. And the federal government says, "Are you sure you want to do this? This is the first time that we've ever been asked to be able to."
Yeah, well, it was like John Barron's like, "Woohoo! I won this in the state court." Right. And then, of course, the state political subdivision goes, "Nah, this can't be right," because when we read the Bill of Rights, we read it as, well, that was a restriction on the federal government only, and now you're appealing to the federal government to act as a police power to use its police powers against the state political subdivisions, and of course the state position was like, that's not why we included it in the Bill of Rights. And so the Supreme Court took it up, and John Marshall read through all the documentation and agreed. It's like, well, we can't find anywhere where the state's intent was to allow the federal government to be the policing power against the state if the state ever engaged in a deprivation.
Well, so now that opens the can of worms to be able to allow for basically the federalization of enforcement that they never had before.
Well, that's how it came down. So that a lot of the intrusion into the state political subdivisions of the federal government in judicial matters comes on the heels of this doctrine that was adopted by the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Prior to the establishment of this doctrine, the Supreme Court of the United States could not enforce the Bill of Rights on behalf of the citizen of the state and force the state to say pay a tort claim against the state, or say force the state to nullify an unconstitutional piece of legislation that it had just passed that would disadvantage a citizen. So it's like, there's a lot of people out there that are screaming for the 10th Amendment power of the state. Well, be careful of those people, because those people might be people that want to use state power to oppress you.
Yes.
So be careful.
So tell me, Ron, there was something I learned a couple of years ago. Maybe it was something that you mentioned, and I also never forgot. Was something called the political question doctrine. Does that come into play in an event like this with what we're seeing?
No, because this is, whenever we're talking about a deprivation, we're talking about substantive law. It's not. Okay. It's not a question. It's not a political question that would be framed. Is it politically expedient for the state of Idaho to be able to deprive a citizen of their rights? Well, if you're going to take that up in front of the SCOTUS, they would say, well, it's not a political question. That's a federal question, right?
Well, where they're using a political means to be able to try. I mean, I guess that would be difficult to prove. Never mind.
Yeah. Well, in this situation, you're right, because I think what you're seeing is a combination of a political action combined with the deprivation, which is a federal question. So there's a combination of those two factors here, and you're right, there are.
Okay, cool. Well, I think I'll probably incorporate the links in the video that I actually sent you as well. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to this?
Right offhand, I'd say no.
Okay.
You can supply the Idaho Farm Bureau Federation's letter, which I think people need to read it, because in the letter they were appealing on behalf of farmers. They weren't appealing for legislation on behalf of political subdivisions. So even if the people said, okay, well, we are okay with our farmers being protected, so let's pass the legislation for our farmers, then fine. Do this. When you call in, tell them that you want the liability privilege for political subdivisions removed from the legislation.
Yes.
They already have 11th Amendment immunity.
That's right. That's a good one. I was wondering and that kind of flips it back on its head, because they obviously added citizens and dogs and cats in the end just to be able to make it look see, we're going to protect everybody.
Well, yeah, and that's, you couch it. Like if you want to pass some really nefarious legislation, which this definitely, this is some of the most nefarious anti-constitutional legislation I've seen in a long, long time. And brother, I read a lot of it, I'll tell you that. So if you want to get something by the people, all you need to do is couch it in appropriate language. And a lot of this is focus group tested talking points. And man, I got to bring this up. Now that we're on it, I got to bring it up. It's like, okay, who is this guy? Is he a Republican? Because I'll tell you what, everything that I've seen from the guy, his political strategy comes right out of the left's playbook. Right out of the left's playbook. It's like, okay, is he batting for the wrong team here? It's like, his political affiliations should be called into question at this point. I don't think that this man is operating, from everything that I can tell, he is not operating from a Republican standpoint. There's nothing Republican in the guy at all. His blood's got to be blue. Well,
and in addition to that, I've heard very, very little about what I had mentioned before about the conspiratorial elements of this, and one of those that I have read through my obtaining knowledge of Agenda 21 is the government that's no longer done by and for the people, guaranteeing us a Republican form of government. It's to be able to transfer and empower the UN certified NGOs and unelected bureaucrats like the health officials to replace that old form of government. So this is really a multiple layer tragedy for all of us. And it's right in line with Agenda 21. Although I can't pull it out in chapter and verse right now because it is kind of a complicated topic. There's hundreds of pages, but that's the one thing that I did get out of it, is that it's all moving toward that sort of globalist style supranational governing system. And
well, there's more to Governor Little, I think, than most people understand. I'm not going to talk about it right now. Politically, it could be very, probably dangerous to talk about some of this stuff, so we'll just leave it where we have it right now. But to say, or even to, if you're a conservative, to even have the opinion that Governor Brad Little is acting on behalf of the citizens from the conservative platform and in a conservative way, you just can't. There's nothing in this guy's actions, there's nothing in anything this guy has done that could act as proof to be able to support that. Nothing.
Well, and I would further that to say that he actually came out in support and verbally in support of sustainable development, which is the UN Agenda 21, which proves the fact that he's a little, I would say, darker red perhaps than blue, but be that as it may, he's definitely not operating as an alleged true conservative that his supporters say that he is. So, well, I appreciate you being on and sharing this with us, Ron. And if there's anything that comes up and we have any updates or or anything like that. I'd love to be able to do my part to be able to try to bring attention to other people in any way, shape, or form that I can. So, and I really appreciate your the amount of time that you've spent. You've been consistent for as long as I've known you, and in understanding the law. And it's really nice to be able to see that people are now starting to respect all of the sacrifices and the work that you've done to get where you are. So I hope to continue really good things for you, because you're one of the best when it comes to that. So, and I appreciate your friendship.
I appreciate your friendship as well. You know, that core group of conservatives, you know, if people hear me opine about the conservative underground, you know, I consider people that have been doing this for as long as we have, that are a loose but yet organized group of people, the conservative underground, you know, and you're definitely in that, in that. I consider you part of that movement. And so, you know, if anybody hears me say that, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. All right. Well, keep me in the loop whenever you find anything. If this is a reasonable enough, you know, venue or whatever to share with other people, please feel free to use me and abuse me anytime.
All right, Tom. Thanks, buddy.
All right, buddy. Thanks, Ron.
All right, peace.
Bye.